So thank you all for joining us. I know some more people will probably filter in over the next few minutes, but that's fine. So this is our 5G and Coffee, our informal webinar series we started to help you guys get to know 5G better and in a more easy to digest format, in my opinion. We did one of these before. You guys really seemed to like it, so this is the second one, and we plan to keep these going. Today we're talking about using 5G to steer your organization towards success. My name is Mark Indelicato, the Content Marketing Specialist here at RCN Technologies, and I will be helping to moderate today's panel. So let's go to the next slide to introduce our speakers. Jason Dorough, VP of Enterprise Sales at Digi, Jacob Perry, our lead engineer here at RCN Technologies, and Matt McKinney, Partner Development Manager at Digi. So Jacob, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. All right, so this is just going to be a quick overview for anybody that's new or anybody just joining us wanting to know, kind of just get a base of what 5G is, how is it different, and kind of what to expect so everybody can kind of start on the same page. So first and foremost, 5G works a little differently than other bands in the fact that it actually has three spectrums that it falls into: low band, mid band, high band. High band is millimeter wave, both mean the same thing. That's where you're going to see the double digits of gigahertzages. The frequencies are much closer together, so you get a lot of speed and not a whole lot of distance. Mid-band is that kind of the in-between, kind of not. It's definitely, hopefully, going to be a best of both worlds scenario, but it definitely has advantages. So that's in the 2.4 to 6 range. That one has a little bit more speed than the low band, a little bit more speed than 4G, but can travel a lot farther than high band can. And then we have low band that actually lives in the sub-gigahertz spectrum. That one is going to be still not slow. You're still going to see 30 to even up to 250 megabits per second through it. But one of the biggest advantages of low band is how far it can travel. So, moving on, we have our speeds, of course, a very impressive chart showing the differences. LTE and low band, once again, low band, we're going to see increases in speed, but with the improvements of gigabit class LTE and things like that, low band and LTE are going to live around the same spectrum, but with 5G, of course, you're still going to get that ultra low latency, and you're still going to get a much wider range along with a much higher client count, which is going to be great. Mid-band, we see it again a little bit faster, can get that little bit more draw distance. And then, of course, all the way up to high band, which can theoretically go up to 10 gigabits a second.
Sorry, I'm trying to advance to the next slide here. Let's see, there we go.
All right, and then of course talking about latency, really the all-star whenever it comes to 5G and how it's going to differ from LTE. This is definitely what's going to make an extremely large impact as far as how technology is going to be affected. 5G has a much lower latency time on average, depending on which band you're in, and can theoretically get even lower latency speeds than what we're seeing today with the right work in the right places, which can allow us to do a lot more things instantaneously almost, which is going to be really, really incredible. And then, of course, you may have heard carriers talking about the 5G core that they're building out. This is all going to be the back end of 5G. This is where we're going to get things like slicing, which is software-defined networking just in a new way that's going to allow us to literally slice off pieces of network for specific customers, slice it off for specific enterprises, so that way it's in its own encapsulated environment, which brings about much better security, of course, along with hopefully better performance as well, because it is in its own environment. And with that, we're going to have the ability to upgrade and move resources at a much better pace than we could before, just by sitting at a computer and making those changes live rather than having to have a technician go out to a site and cut cables and move them and do all sorts of wonderful, wonderful things. So really, really, really exciting things coming from this.
Awesome. Thank you, Jacob. We appreciate that. Let's see. So yeah, now we're on to our coffee chat. See, that was a real nice, easy introduction into 5G there. So to keep it simple, we're going to start with something I think will help a lot of people. I'd love to hear how you all, what your answer to this is. So how can organizations best prepare for the 5G transition? I'll stop sharing my screen here for a minute so we can go full screen. But yeah, we'll start with you, Jacob, since you're talking. How can organizations best prepare for the 5G transition?
Well, if anybody here is wondering that question, I'd say you're definitely making the right first step. I would say education is the biggest thing when it comes to 5G. Really get educated on it, really figure out where it fits your niche, where it fits in. We've talked about a lot how there's so many businesses out there that are going to benefit from 5G, and there's a lot of them that don't need to rush to it right off the bat by any means. 4G isn't going away anytime soon. LTE isn't going away anytime soon, and it's only improving for a lot of use cases. But the caveat to that I always say is with 5G, it really gives you the opportunity to think more creatively. And I always encourage people to think about not just their internet speed or their phone systems and how can those things be improved, but think about things that you don't have in your business today, IoT solutions, private cellular networking, things of that sort are going to be on the rise, and we're going to see a lot more creative solutions for problems that you may haven't thought of before in your company.
Awesome. Jason, I'll pivot to you next. What do you think about this question, and what do you think about Jacob's answer?
I agree with that answer completely, and I would kind of take a step further and kind of talk about the LTE component, right? So LTE has actually opened up the doors to a lot of new use cases, a lot of capabilities, and customers I don't think realize how far LTE as a standalone has kind of come. Not only as something where you can deliver a lot of IoT type use cases, but also from I'll call it an overall networking standpoint. So we have one of our largest retail customers. They have 15,000 stores across the U.S. They've gone to 100% cellular solution just using LTE. And the reason for that is because they'll tell me straight up, hey, we're actually a real estate company. What do you mean by that? Their most important asset is not what they sell in the stores. The most important asset is the location of their stores. So they have the desire to really just kind of move around, be aggressive and build outs and locations of their stores. And early on, we started having them, turn up LTE because it was taking so long to get wireline services into some of these locations. And by the time the wireline got in, because we were using the cellular as a backup for some amount of time, the store actually complained when they went on wireline because the wireline service actually was a degradation for them. So I'm just I can't stress it enough that getting comfortable with LTE and finding those new use cases, things to really kind of improve your business generally, along with your network, are my opinion extremely important to understand now, so you can really have a kind of a vision for what 5G can give you.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that was great. It's interesting you said that, because really these past 10 years have been a huge focus on mobility and what you can do, just no matter where you are. And then of course the pandemic accelerated that. But Matt, do you have anything to add there?
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute. I apologize. And I think Jason did a great job kind of covering that. So I'll try to offer some insight on the next one.
Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and pass this next one on to you then. So how has your job changed as 5G has become more mainstream?
I think just the demand, really. I mean, customers have, it's obviously a big buzzword in the industry now. And, as all cellular technologies evolve, I mean, the first to bat at getting the marketing out there is obviously all of our carrier partners. And I think they've all kind of done a really good job of getting the 5G message out there. And now it's kind of our job as an OEM and obviously y'all's job as a reseller to break that down and what that really means for the customer. So I think the biggest thing with it being mainstream is just making sure that the commercial you see during the Super Bowl doesn't necessarily translate to some of the things you need real world. But obviously the products are there, the networks are there, and they're coming along. So I think just being able to educate our partners on what's available and what's out there as it stands today and what's coming down the road. So I don't know if that answers it or not.
Yeah. So we'll pass this on to Jason next. Jason, how has your job changed since 5G has become more mainstream?
I would say, again, it's probably more about the education with customers. So I'm kind of seeing customers fall into a couple different camps. First and foremost, I mean, I do have customers that are just, they're always pushing the envelope in terms of speed. So they're saying, hey, I just need more speed. And that's why, they're asking for the 5G. The next one is one that I think is more of a pragmatic approach. It's one where customers are kind of saying, hey, I'm kind of concerned because I really want to future-proof my investment. And some of the customers that we're working with now are even kind of seeing changes on the LTE side, because what carriers are doing is their majority of their assets are really based around what spectrum they own and the spectrum that they're advertising from these towers. And what a lot of times happens when these newer technologies come out, even when it was a shift from 3G to 4G, and even some of the LTE band adjustments that we've seen, for example, T-Mobile launching a band 71, which is really benefiting their customers because, on your chart, I mean, it's great when you look at those high speeds and you see those waves real close together and you're thinking, hey, I can get 10 gigabits. But, making 10 gigabits work in a real solution is extremely difficult because you not only do you need to be very, very close, you need line of sight to that particular tower. What band 71 gives to our T-Mobile clients is ability to really penetrate within buildings to get that LTE signal to really kind of bathe longer distances and really have better coverage. So I think that carriers have that balance between, hey, I've got to build out my network so I can support the customers that are further away. And then for the customers that are in more urban environments, I can really kind of, drive up that high band or high frequency type solutions with millimeter wave. Just a quick note, Verizon, when they were pushing out their focus on 5G, they were all about, hey, it's got to be the ultra band, it's got to be millimeter wave. That's really what 5G is all about. And I'm now seeing them kind of take a back step on that, saying, whoa, wait a minute. We can't build out our network to make it, millimeter wave everywhere. So now they're starting to look more in that mid band, which a lot of times customers or vendors will refer to as sub-6. So the millimeter wave, yeah, it's great, but they had problems even getting millimeter wave working in a single NBA arena, right? So that's just giving you an idea of how difficult it can be to make that work. When it works, it's great. If it doesn't, it's a little more problematic. And that's why I think T-Mobile has a pretty good strategy where they're saying, hey, we're going to cover the low end, we're going to cover the high end, and then give customers the ability to kind of choose what's in the middle. So again, I guess my second camp of customers is they want to future-proof their investment. They want to see something where they can purchase it and then kind of have a longer runway, a longer life cycle with their investment in terms of their equipment. And then the other camp, I hear customers saying, I really don't know what this 5G thing is all about. Just I just feel like I need it because everybody's talking about it. So if you're at that camp, you're probably at the point where if you're not really pushing the envelope yet in speeds, it's probably not a right fit for you. But again, I still would recommend to our customers to get some implementations of standard LTE out there, gigabit LTE. You can see some amazing speeds. I mean, we're seeing commercial connectivity on towers upwards of 200 meg, even on gigabit LTE. So I just want to stress that I think 5G is it's kind of evolving, right? Just like LTE stands for long-term evolution. I think the 5G is just evolving into a greater state where you can the slicing that was talked about. I mean, that's something I'm really looking forward to because now you can really have more SD-WAN, wireless SD-WAN, right? And that's kind of in my mind the holy grail of where 5G can lead to. Sorry, I did a lot of talking.
No, you're great. Yeah. That's I really agree with all that, and I know a lot of our job is re-educating people, because you see all this marketing like, oh man, blazing fast speeds, or you watch a YouTube video where someone downloads, like a 4K movie in like 2 seconds or whatever. But that's not reality, like you said, in a lot of places. And I actually didn't even know that about the NBA stadium, where they were having a lot of trouble with it. I know but it requires like thousands and thousands of modules just to get something consistent, right?
It does, and there was a lot of articles on that when they first started. That how are they going to cover a city if we can't cover an arena, right? Because a leaf falling in the wind, right, can disrupt a millimeter wave signal. But again, and a lot of times I'm working with what I'll call distributed enterprises. Think of banks, think of retailers, insurance agencies, customers that have lots of sites, and even work at home users is actually starting to really ramp up more because of the pandemic, obviously. But the point is an enterprise customer now has lots of locations where they want to really satisfy connectivity with a single vendor, right? So that distributed enterprise approach, if you think I want to do millimeter wave at every single one of those locations, now I'm talking about boring outside the building to try to put some type of an array that'll capture that signal and bring it in. Customers are just not, they just don't have the appetite for that. That's why that band 71 I talked about, right? It's such a great thing for T-Mobile, because they're saying, hey, I've got the lowest band available, so it's going to have the best building penetration out there. So I'm going to have greater distance, right? So it really gives T-Mobile a nice little edge, in the marketplace, because of that lower band that they have.
Right. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you for your answer. Jacob, I'll pass the same question to you. How has your job changed as 5G's become more mainstream?
I'd first like to say I love the angle of both from you, Matt, and Jason, of how the customers are responding to it. And I especially love looking at millimeter wave. I feel like whenever people talk about how to not use it, people really focus on the reasons why you shouldn't, the problems that are involved, short distances, terrible penetration, all things that we're definitely going to work through or find new use cases that fit that bill. But I love taking the angle of not ignoring the mid and low band, and really seeing that there are way more advantages to 5G that we should be a lot more excited about than just the breakneck speeds. And so I actually love this question, because I feel like my job has changed really dynamically ever since the rise of 5G, because whenever I first started for RCN, and how RCN's always been, we've always been the failover experts. And we still are, for sure, whenever it comes to LTE and even 5G now. But even whenever I started here, it's amazing to think about coming to this place where LTE or cellular 5G is no longer in discussions of being the backup internet. It's not as good, but it'll get you by in a pinch. Now we're talking about it far surpassing wireline to an extreme degree, to where it's going to become the mainstream, and it's going to become what everybody has in their homes eventually. And education, especially. I mean, the amount of learning that I've done ever since 5G is on the rise. I've learned way more about RF and all of that technology field as a result of 5G than I did during LTE. It's been really wild.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. All right, so let's move on to our next question, and I'm not sure who I want to pitch this to just yet. Jason and Matt, I want to know what are some of the ways to get ahead of the competition with 5G, and just to spin this just a little bit. Our most recent poll that we just people are really interested in 5G hardware. So if you want to talk about some of the options that you guys offer, I think that would be pretty neat.
Sure.
I'll let Jason expand on this. Just want to touch real quick. So I think, this is a great question, and appreciate you bringing this up as it relates to hardware. So I think a big differentiator with Digi is the fact that we have a field upgradable core plug-in module. So the reason that's important is, let's say that a customer's long-term plan is to have 5G at all of their locations, but let's say they have 100 locations, only 20 of them actually have 5G coverage right now. Well, the great thing about the Digi plug-in module is 20 of those locations can have a 5G modem plugged in right now, and the other 80 can have just a standard LTE modem. So it allows them to upgrade those devices as the 5G gets to where those locations are. But I think that's a huge differentiator from the Digi portfolio, is we have the ability to do that upgrade so they don't have to rip and replace everything once 5G hits those specific locations. But Jason, I don't know if you want to touch on that or have other thoughts.
Sure. I think that additionally to add to that is that to get ahead of the competition, right? I think he who is more flexible in business, or she, right? Whoever is more flexible in business and best supports their customers ultimately wins. I just don't know of another technology that's more flexible than cellular connectivity, and 5G really kind of brings it home. It will become, in my mind, wireline replacement. I mean, we're seeing it right now with some of the gigabit LTE customers that I'm working with, where they're literally making the jump to a 100% cellular type network. But 5G really just it really does expand the customer options above and beyond that. So even if they don't even need millimeter wave to get those type of options. And if you think about wireline circuits, right? If you think about copper, how it degrades over time, ultimately I see the last mile is really one of a wireless type scenario, because it's going to be so much easier to support and administer the frequency optimizations, the compressions that we're able to do on a wireless side is going to really allow us to really push a lot more bandwidth on a wireless standpoint. So I just really see that as the future of connectivity generally, and I think it's going to help customers be more flexible, have more and better support, I should say, of their own customers going forward, having the flexibility to do business whenever and wherever they want.
Awesome. Jacob, I'll pass the same question to you. I'm curious from maybe how much infrastructure is required for a company that's looking to upgrade? If you can kind of speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd like to say great answers by Matt and Jason. A lot of information in there that definitely gets ahead on that. And I would say not that much, honestly, whenever it comes to a lot of the benefits that you're going to gain. Jason, you touched on a lot, Band 71. Being in that mid-band spectrum, you guys and other companies are coming out with 5G capable devices that you could purchase and get installed into your business fairly easily. The setup is not too terrible. A lot of this infrastructure running that we're talking about, like you touched on, Jason, comes with the millimeter wave, and that's where a lot of that hardware is going to come from. A lot of infrastructure is going to need to change. But for the low and mid bands, you really don't need anything that extremely different than what you need today for LTE. The biggest thing is, of course, location. And so, of course, T-Mobile's building out there nationwide, and they're covering a large portion of our country. But there's still a lot more to go, and of course, there's a lot more to go for the other companies to catch up. And so, really, the way to stay ahead is definitely don't jump the gun and say, I'm going to buy a 5G capable device, and I'm going to get a T-Mobile card to run, mid-band Band 71. It's going to be awesome. Before checking the heat map and seeing, I don't actually have power that's going to allow that for me, and we don't know when those towers are going to be installed or when the towers in your area are going to be upgraded to that point. So once again, it just goes back to education and research for sure before jumping the gun on anything.
Awesome. Yeah, I would like to ask for the majority of businesses, and just speaking primarily about sub-6. I mean, is this something that is this still the future for a lot of places, or is this something that's like, hey, if you want it, it's right out there. You're ready to go get it.
I'd say it's a little bit of both. I don't think it runs extreme one way or the other, depending on where you're going with and where you're located. I mean, obviously, we're still going to see a lot of the more remote states still be out for a while. But I mean, even areas like we're here, where we're at here in Knoxville, and our neighbors Nashville and Memphis, if mid-band isn't there, I definitely foresee it being there in not a lot of time.
Okay. Awesome.
And the other thing to think about from the technology standpoint, we've got a couple of different true 5G devices that are available today. The radios that we're using in those devices, we don't manufacture the radios. We get the radios from underlying suppliers, and then we build our routers around them. But the radios actually support kind of simultaneous 4G LTE as well as the 5G at the same time. So I think that's what the 5G technology is all about. And I think we learned a lot from the transition to quote unquote 4G. I don't know if anybody remembers the WiMAX revolution. Everybody said WiMAX was going to be the end all be all. Just like when you're dealing with, the VCR versus Betamax, all those kind of things, right? Sometimes you don't know which technology is going to really win out. I could see a situation where millimeter wave just stays in the urban areas and the urban areas only, and then sub-6 and low band and 4G LTE type technologies really cover the rest of the country. And to that end, I don't think that's still a bad strategy, right? So you're just not going to get the super high speed, but you're still going to get really good speeds out of those type of technology. So the radios that we have a larger transportation device. We get a lot of customers that are in kind of the mass transit. Think of rail, think of bus type solutions. We have a router that does 5G for those type of solutions, and they're not interested in millimeter wave because those things are moving around and they're just not going to get millimeter wave speeds. So they're focused on the sub-6 as well as the LTE. And then we have a router that is designed to be kind of remote mounted outside of your equipment room to get the best signal. And then it has a PoE connection where it just drives a PoE Ethernet back. And then on that router, 1 gig Ethernet is no longer good enough, right? So we put on not only Wi-Fi 6 to get gigabits plus speeds on the Wi-Fi side of it, but the wired side, we're now 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports, right? So everything that we're doing and designing into our routers these days, we have to be able to look at, number one, the processor and being able to process that much data, but then also the interfaces that we have on the router so our handoffs can support the 5G speeds that we're seeing.
Awesome, some great answers there for sure. Let's throw it to our last question for right now. When does 5G become a necessity in business? Matt, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, I would say the necessity comes based on the mission critical data. So, I think an application that we've heard of, body worn cameras by police officers, and let's say they're in a remote area and they their sergeant or whoever their superior officer is during that duty, they want to be able, if they are on a call and the backup is 10-15 minutes out, the ability to go into that video and see real time what's going on with that interaction with the officer and the suspect that they're interacting with. And I think that's where you see mission critical needing that very low latency ability to kind of live stream, if you will, real time video. But also other arenas too. I mean, you see a lot of like smart advertisers that are starting to use a lot of facial recognition type technology where it needs that instantaneous speed to do targeted ads or whatever the case may be. So I think you're starting to see it more on where the latency is an issue, not an issue, but kind of a hindrance in current situations. But I really, I think it goes back to just that mission critical, how fast does it need to be and how quickly do you need this information transfer back and forth, which to Jason's point, we're seeing speeds capable of that on LTE, but obviously 5G being the next evolution of that or some form of that. I think it really just comes down to what the business needs are, and if they need that data, how quickly do they need it?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great answer. We did a webinar last week on 5G in retail, and one of the things that stuck out to me was that cable internet, so businesses that have cable internet still have their bandwidth shared with everyone that's around them, right? And that's one of the huge things. We've been talking about speed a lot, but the capacity and the bandwidth that comes with 5G really, I think, can't be overstated. But I will pass that on to Jason now. When does 5G become a necessity in business?
I think some of this has to do with kind of the carriers, right? And the carriers are still kind of, learning, the impact of customers' data usage on their networks. So I think once the carriers really start to get more comfortable, and I think you're seeing that now, with kind of opening up the floodgates and then getting away from some of these metered plans. I think that is what's still kind of hindering some of the growth of cellular. because there's always that risk of metering getting kicked in or data throttling once you get to certain speeds. And I just see the carriers kind of slowly releasing more and more unlimited plans. They still sometimes have high-end caps. But that being said, I think that once those barriers are eliminated, then I think 5G, even I keep sounding like a broken record here, but gigabit LTE is extremely viable in the business today. So I would just kind of just continue to promote that. That I think it's now, right? It's becoming the now use case to flexibility, ease of use, ease of deployment. Nothing beats. I mean, we've talked about this since the 3G days, right? Nothing's better than backing up a wireline circuit than a wireless circuit, right? You're literally bypassing that fiber-seeking backhoe that might take out all your wireline circuits or services all at once, and it really just becomes that fail-safe. So it's about, in my mind, prioritization and safety of your data, as well as the ability to really kind of push a lot of data that's unmetered. And I think it's available now.
Yeah, and to that point, and to your earlier point, you were saying how the radios in a lot of your devices can do either, right? So if
Yes.
If 5G is something that's not in your area now, but is going to be, it's not necessarily a bad idea to start planning for that and to take advantage of it early.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jacob, same question. When does 5G become a necessity in business?
Yeah. I love the discussions of the public sector. Whenever you're talking about getting really, really quick response times, we've discussed the use case of getting live feedback as a firefighter or as a police officer during a high intensity situation, or a surgeon surgery offsite with zero latency, which is of course super crucial. All of these things, we have ways to do them today. I think one of the biggest and coolest discussions is that capacity aspect of it. So the research that we've done behind what 5G is really going to impact has made us realize that the IoT world, one of our biggest limiters of that isn't actually the technology available. It's how many congruent devices we can keep connected, and how many we can keep confidently connected and know that they're not going to be disconnected, which goes into, talk of having changed those ports out. Now a gigabit port isn't enough. Now it's a 2.5 gigabit port. I've seen companies that are building, of course, routers into the antennas. So that way, the communication that's happening from receiving the signal is going straight into the device. And of course, we can't talk about all these things without talking about private cellular. So having 5G coming to a building, going into an antenna, going into a device that then relays, gigabit class LTE or 5G interior, almost as if, think about it the same way you would a Wi-Fi network, only it's cellular. Then you can connect way, way more devices. You can be confident that those devices are going to stay connected. And even if they lose connection, they're going to grab themselves right back on because of the technology involved. We're already seeing companies today solve problems with this technology inside of warehouses with automated arms moving packages all around. Before having this many devices connected just wasn't a possibility. Mm-hmm. And so whenever it becomes a necessity is whenever you've ran into a problem that the current state of technology and connectivity is what's preventing you from moving forward. And I think we're going to see a lot of this type of innovation and this type of, what we think about as just like the really cool solutions that are going to come out of 5G that we're going to see on the news and go, whoa, that's amazing that, Tesla, Apple, all these companies are thinking of doing these things. And that's where we're going to see this kind of innovation first. And of course, a lot of these companies are placed in huge metropolitan areas, Los Angeles, New York. And so they're going to have the resources to be able to really push the ladder on what's possible today. So I would say for some people, depending on how you look at it, it kind of already is a necessity because these researchers and these developers have been trying to solve these problems for years, and 5G solves a lot of those problems today.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that angle you took. It's kind of like we were saying earlier. 99% of the marketing is the high speeds, but there's so many cool things that comes with 5G, and I think it's really just the tip of the iceberg right now. So this is the questions that you guys have asked, and let's see. Here's a good one. Can you guys speak to 5G and IoT? There is supposedly some form of wireless charging via the 5G RAN for IoT devices on the roadmap. I have briefly heard about this as well, so I'm very interested. I'm not sure who would want to tackle that, but yeah, let us know.
Well, I'm not an expert in it, but my understanding is that usually you have to be pretty close. So I think it's running at a little bit higher frequencies. I think that they've done some testing on that with Wi-Fi, and they're able to get, kind of think of like tags and stuff for clothing in stores, right? Where you have something that's more low powered that they can charge those things up. But I think there's been talk that, over time, they think they can evolve this technology to even like charge up your smartphone, right, as you're going. By the way, that might be a little bit of a nirvana. I don't know what that does to the atmosphere. If that, they talk about wireless killing honeybees, right? I mean, what the heck is that going to do? But I think that in a low power situation, I think they're almost there. But maybe there is some kind of promise where we can get really, some higher devices. So I mean, if it really is something that can be, I think it would kind of change the world, right? Because the battery problem is a real problem, right? Think about just tagging things out in the field, right? I mean, from an agricultural standpoint, from a science standpoint, tagging animals, all those kind of things. I mean, I just really think it can be a kind of a magical thing if they can charge batteries remotely, because that is a limiter in some of the use cases out there. Anyway.
Yeah. And I think that really speaks to, and I know I've heard Jacob mention this before on a previous webinar, but it's really difficult to tell what 5G is going to turn into. In the same way that when 4G and LTE came out, the endpoint is vastly different, or where we are now is vastly different from where it started, right? So I think that's just one of the many possibilities for 5G. And I think it's a pretty exciting field just to see where it goes.
Agreed.
Yeah. So here's another question: how reliable is the current 5G coverage? So I guess this is just if you were to upgrade, say maybe your phone says you have 5G. How well is that going to work for you?
I'll start this one off. So.
Okay.
It's kind of how we talked about earlier. Every carrier is going to tell you that it's everywhere. Maybe not. It definitely isn't right now. Whenever it comes to the low and mid band, it's definitely a lot of places, and that's why it comes to do your research. Definitely take a look at your area. Make sure that you're involved and you're there. Millimeter wave, we're not going to see that on a large scale for a very long time, or to your point, Jason, maybe not ever. Maybe that's something that stays in high density metropolitan areas, which would definitely make perfect sense. But like Jason was saying, Digi is offering products that work with both 4G and 5G low and mid bands. So even if you don't have that in your area, you can definitely get hooked up with one of these devices that can do both. And then whenever it does become prevalent in your area, you're ready for it.
Awesome. Okay, here's let's see. Here's another one. It looks like we kind of covered this a bit before, but we can redo this. How difficult is a company-wide hardware update? How much local infrastructure is required for something like that?
And I guess I'll go in on that one. It really depends on what their current infrastructure is. I mean, if they just have a existing cellular device back there and they decide to upgrade to another carrier like Digi, I mean, it's a simple, rip and replace. But I guess it's a case by case, and that's something we're here to help out with too. I mean, we have teams in place that can help out with things like that here at Digi. So if they're currently using one of our competitors, or they're looking to just completely upgrade from a cable-based solution to a fully wireless solution, we can help walk them through how to best do that. But yeah, I think it's kind of a loaded question because there's a lot of variables there that would go into play. But I'll pass it over to one of the other speakers to expand if they want.
Matt, I think that was a great quick answer to that, for sure. And I completely agree. It depends. It depends on what you have today. Odds are, if you already have cellular infrastructure, you could be halfway there and not even know it yet. But if you don't have any cellular infrastructure, it may not be too much. But I would say it definitely depends on how deep are you wanting to go with it. If you're a business here in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you're looking to get in on the low and mid band spectrum to just improve your overall quality, then it probably wouldn't be too bad. But if you're really digging deep into private cellular, and I live in New York and there's high band and looking into it, there's probably quite a bit of infrastructure change that needs to be done. But as we've been harping on through this whole thing, 9 times out of 10, you probably don't need that much. Not today, anyway.
Yeah, right. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So that's the last of the user questions. I actually have one last question to kind of kick off, or to end this segment with. Each of you, I'm curious, what is your favorite implementation of 5G that you've seen a company do? If you guys have seen anything like interesting or really cool, or just like a nice little success story, I'm just curious. Matt, if you want to go first, just to put you in the hot seat.
Yeah, and the seat is very, very hot for me. I apologize. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, with it being such a new technology, I'm not aware of a whole lot of large deployments we've done. I mean, we have a lot of proof of concepts out there with some transit customers and some other industrial and commercial customers, just to kind of test the waters in their local areas.
Yeah.
But we're as an OEM, I mean, we're constantly evolving and building this stuff every single day. And I think we're still kind of where everyone else is we're ready to go after some of these opportunities with you guys. It's just a matter of finding out what the solution is and why 5G is needed. But to answer your question, I don't really have an example, but we're more than happy to have those conversations with you guys as the customers and partners start asking for it.
Awesome. So to clarify, your answer is that anyone that's watching or listening right now, whenever they reach out to you, that's going to be your favorite 5G implementation. Is that right?
Absolutely. I have it already earmarked. So whoever wants to do that, they're going to be my number one person. So if you want to be a big dumb redneck's number one person from South Carolina, bring it on.
Absolutely. All right, Jason, you have any cool work that you guys have done, or even proof of concepts, things like that might be interesting?
So I'll go with Matt's theme of my biggest implementation is my favorite, right? And it's a mass transit type opportunity for both bus and rail. It is a large metropolitan city in the United States, and they literally were on 3G devices, and they were getting the notifications from the carrier. You got to get off this. You got to move, right? And originally they had been testing kind of a 4G LTE router of ours, and they just recently said, no, we're just gonna go from 3G to 5G all at once. We need the bandwidth anyway, so they're now piloting 5G type routers, and it's going to be a multi-million-dollar opportunity from a Digi perspective, because the cost of the equipment and the amount of routers they're getting. It's a pretty good number. So that's my favorite, just because it's our largest right now.
Yeah, that's excellent. Jacob, got anything interesting to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, honestly, my answers are pretty similar. Of course, there's been implementations. Of course, there's been higher speeds as a result. But we're really just dipping our toes in the water of what is going to be really, really exciting about all of this. So definitely hard to think of any one thing in particular. I'd say the most exciting implementations are the ones I'm still seeing in laboratories today.
Yeah.
That are being tested at some customers, and will eventually become a product that's available, which is going to be really exciting.